Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition D&D. Today I'm going to finish talking about the basic information that you will find for statistics of monsters and reading them in the monster manual, and a little bit about what other information you can find in the monster manual for when using it. So let's finish talking about what the monster statistics are. We've reached actions. Now, these don't list any kind of typical action that any creature can do, like disengaging and dashing. Anything can do this. These are any kind of special attack actions. These are any kind of special actions that a monster can choose from on their turn. They would choose one of them and do of them. If it's some kind of attack, it would list what kind of targets the attack would be, what you'd be doing to target them, whether it's an attack roll, whether it's just, you point at them and do something, and that will tell you what the results of a hit are, whether that's damage or some other kind of effect, and if there's any sort of results on a miss, it will also mention that. Now, it will say if a creature has multi-attack, which means it would get, let's say, 2 claws and a bite on its turn. It would tell you if it would have that, and that would imply what kind of attack actions it would have. It would get these multiple attacks. You wouldn't use these on an attack of opportunity. On an attack of opportunity, you could still only get a single attack. Now, if it's a weapon that would have some kind of ammunition, if it's a thrown weapons with ammunition, let's say I'm throwing daggers, I would have 2d4 at the start of the combat. You'd roll that for whatever creature would be. If it's using ranged attacks like arrows, it would have 2d10, arrows, bolts, and the like, or sling bullets. That's how many shots it would have before it would run out. Now let's talk a little bit about special abilities a monster might have and explain a little bit. First off is they might have an X times per day ability. This would be a number represented by the letter X in this case. That X could be 1, 2, 3, it could be 10. This says that this creature can use this ability X times per day. So if it's 1, I would use it 1 time per day, and I would have to have a long rest in order to recharge it. Now there's also the recharge ability. The recharge ability has 2 sets of numbers, X to Y. This would be like 1 to 2, 4 to 6, that sort of thing. At the beginning of your turn, if you've used an ability that has a recharge to it, you would roll a d6, and if you get in the range, so that means if you get within this range, so if it's 1 to 2, I'd have to roll a 1 or a 2, then that ability recharges and I get it back to use again. Now, a long or a short rest will automatically recharge this ability. So if I have a recharge ability and I go on a short rest, I get it back automatically. I wouldn't have to keep checking and checking and checking because, insanely enough, there could be the possibility that you'd never, if it's a recharge on a 1 and a 2, and you'd never roll a 1 and a 2, but that's why a short rest automatically gets it back. Now, there are some creatures that can just grapple. There are grappling rules for creatures. Many of these, when we're talking about it, it will say automatically that maybe an attack, it can start a grapple without having to make any kind of check or something like that, that it instigates a grapple easier than what a person would do with less actions, that maybe as part of a claw, it also grabs onto you, that sort of thing. Now, if a creature would have any kind of equipment on it, whether it's magical gear, scrolls, spell books, armor, weapons, it will list it under here to tell you what kind of gear this creature has. Now, I do want to briefly mention legendary creatures. These are special creatures that function as like high monsters in your combat and have their own sets of special abilities. A legendary creature would be similar to like maybe a boss or a mini boss or something that's protecting a very area and you've heard it's legendary. Maybe it isn't the boss of the game you're doing, but you've heard that entering this area you might have to deal with legendary creature X. Anyway, legendary creatures have their own special sets of actions and possibility more because if they have a lair. When we talk about their actions, they get legendary creature actions, which will be described under their creature. They get those back at the beginning of their turn, so they reactivate them, and they can activate a legendary action at the end of an opponent's turn. So effectively, when it's the end of an opponent's turn, they can use one of their legendary actions, and then it will recharge at the beginning of their turn, and they can only use up 1 in this manner per turn. Now, as I said, a legendary creature could have a lair. It's not a given. There are some legendary creatures that don't have lairs. But if a legendary creature does have a lair, on initiative count 20, that means when it would be 20 initiative for everyone. This means not the creature's initiative could be like 2, it could be 22, it could be either. But on initiative count 20, the legendary monster can activate a lair action. It has the option of doing 1 lair action a turn or not. It doesn't need to use one, but if it wants to use one, it can. The other thing about layers is layers give environmental effects. So effectively, around a area of the layer, there might be some kind of magic around it. Let's say you're a creature that's based around cold and you're a legendary creature. If I had a layer and I'm in like a temperate forest, maybe there's some light snowfall around my cave at all times, or there's like light snow on the ground around it. Things like that that make it seem unusual, that sort of hint you that there's something going on there. Now, let's move on, because this is the end of talking about what would make a section. The next part of the book, which is a very important part, most of the monsters you will encounter, A to Z, alphabetical. You can go through there and you can look through the entire list of monsters, and there is a huge one. Now, there are some general subtypes. So if you're looking up a giant, you want to look up giants, whether it's a frost giant, a fire giant, or a hill giant, or a golem is similar. Demons, things like that. They would be demon, comma, whatever it be called. Those are like subgroups that you would look for when searching through here. Now, there are a number of appendices after here which give other important information. The first one gives a lot more like common creatures, like animals, vermins, and smaller creatures like that you're going to use a lot of for one thing, and they're not going to be as critical. A group of dogs isn't going to be some kind of epic encounter. It might be difficult depending on the team that you have assembled, but it's not going to be by itself. They're not villains, they're not memorable creatures, they're just a group of dogs. It's similar for any sort of creature in this area. They're just not like the top tier enemies, though they can be part of it, or they can be weaved into the story pretty decently, but that's why they're sort of in their own appendices. And the last appendices I want to mention is, of course, the NPC appendices. Now, this is a very important one, because these are general statistics for a great number of NPCs your players just might encounter on an adventure. So if you need like some kind of brigand or bandit, you can look up one and equivalently have its stats. You'd know what a general brigand or bandit would have. One example, a good one, is if you need an archmage, you can just pick up an archmage. It's the first one in the book. You just need some kind of really powerful magician, no matter what you're doing with it. You can customize these NPCs a number of different ways that make them their own. You give them a different race. The race makes a difference. These NPCs don't have a race. As soon as you add it in, you add in the ability score bonuses, you add in anything like that. You can also change spells if it's a spellcaster. This lists a basic number of spells that it's assuming these would have. You can change the spells it would have to whatever you want. You can also change its armor and weapons, whatever kind of armor, weapon, and equipment it have. Equipment in general, you could just say. You can change that around as appropriate for whatever you're having. Also, you can give it magic items. If it seems like it's appropriate for this NPC to have a magic item, you can give it to them. These aren't listed with that. So that's it for today. I finished talking about the monster manual. I finished talking about what you're going to see in the entries of these different monsters, so that you know all this little information, what it kind of means, what it's going to mean to you and playing in this and running in this game. And then I finished talking about what's in the rest of the book, talking about just the general entries and the appendices in the back of the book, which are very important to know about, with the general sort of animals and vermin section, and of course the NPCs, which you're really going to probably use a lot. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please just leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows your support for the channel, it shows your support for the Empire, and it shows that you enjoy the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.